Good afternoon. My name is Emily Keller, and I'm here on behalf of the Mayor and Council in Hagerstown, Maryland. We are here today to announce that the City of Hagerstown will be joining nearly 200 municipalities, counties, and states in pursuing legal charges against the nation's largest drug distributors for their role in flooding our communities with opioids. Their negligence has helped lead to the epidemic we are currently facing. In a statement made to NBC News in early 2017, Purdue Pharma said that they are an industry leader in the development of abuse deterrent technology, advocating for the use of prescription drug monitoring programs and supporting access to naloxone, all important components of combating the opioid crisis. Well, Purdue Pharma, I have some questions for you. If you are interested at all in abuse deterrent, then why in the world did you hire hundreds of pharmaceutical reps specifically to sell OxyContin? If you are interested at all in abuse deterrent, then why did you downplay the addictiveness of OxyContin? Why did you go on such an active marketing campaign for OxyContin? When it's estimated that 75 to 82% of heroin users begin with prescription pills, I say it's time for companies like you to pay for the crisis that you helped create. An analysis by the National Center for Injury Prevention and Control using data from 2013 estimated the cost of treating overdoses, abuse, and dependence on prescription opioids alone cost American society some $78.5 billion per year. To put that figure into context, the U.S. spent $79 billion on SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, that same year, and it has only gotten worse since 2013. Locally, there's been significant costs for our law enforcement, our fire, and our EMS. There's been significant costs to our businesses due to loss of productivity, workers' comp claims, and a severely decreasing workforce. There's been significant costs to our citizens, with decreasing property values and a decrease in quality of life, a lot of which you can trace back to issues that stem from addiction. Then, there are things that we just can't put a price on. We can't put a value on the decreased quality of life. We can't put a value on the emotional burden of substance use. We can't put a value on the impacts of children whose parents are suffering from an opioid crisis. Most importantly, we can't put a value on the cost of loss of life. In Washington County, there have been hundreds of overdoses and 49 deaths last year alone. There were 142 substance-exposed newborns in fiscal year 17. CRS took hundreds more calls. They've given Narcan more year-to-date in 2018 than compared to the previous 4 years year-to-date at this time. Most of our mental health services providers are on a several-week wait period, and the addiction services that we do have are jam-packed. This epidemic, largely caused by pharmaceutical companies' complete lack of accountability and care about anyone or anything other than their pockets, has wreaked havoc on my city, our county, our state, and our country. I stand in front of you today proudly on behalf of my fellow city council members to say that we have had enough of watching our community suffer. I stand in front of you today as a mom of a little girl who deserves better than to have the chance of being misled into medication that is being pushed by a pharmaceutical company. And I stand in front of you today as a person who had to bury my very best friend because of substance abuse. I know the pain, I know the helplessness, and I know the devastation that this epidemic has caused so many of you watching. I'm so thankful for our city council, who I know does not plan on backing down. These companies created this heartache. You created this burden. You created a reason for all of us to sit in meetings and think about how many people we could save if we just had the money to do it, while you profited billions and billions and billions of dollars. For me, this is to honor Ashley Wharton, but for so many of you, this is to honor all the people that we've lost. I look forward to those that created this mess being held accountable. It's time for companies to take responsibility to help us repair our people, repair our city, and it's time to help us heal. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is AJ Serafini. I'm here with the Pool Law Group, and we are serving as local counsel in this litigation to represent the city of Hagerstown. The Poole Law Group consists of myself and Bruce Poole, and the consortium of attorneys that we have aligned ourselves with, it's about 7 firms, and the 2 biggest firms are Levin Papantonio and Barron and Budd. They are involved in multi-district litigation all the time. This is what they do, and they're very good at it. So first, Emily, I think we may hire her for our next closing argument. That was a phenomenal speech, and you could tell the absolute passion she has, and I feel the exact same way about our city of Hagerstown. My office is on Franklin Street, half a block down. I walk that street every day, and I see just devastation, and it really is because of the opioid abuse, the opioid epidemic that we have across the country, but especially here in Western Maryland and the city of Hagerstown. The CDC statistics on Western Maryland are that for every 1 person walking the street, that person has at least 1 opioid prescription. Okay? There's been such overprescription, just pumping these pills into our communities, and like Emily said, the advertisement is these pills are the answers to all your problems, and they're not addictive. And when these big companies were called to the mat by different government entities to say, you know what, we're noticing our residents seem to be addicted to these pills, their response was, well, maybe you're just not giving them enough. Let's give them even more pills. It's that type of absurd response that has gotten us into the situation. As Emily already discussed, cost is $78.5 billion per year, and it's now the leading cause of death for those under 50. Just absolutely incredible. So how do attorneys get involved in this case? Why do we need attorneys? I mean, that's a question that almost everybody I know asks me, why do we need attorneys? And, insert all the attorney jokes you want to, right? But in this case, the attorneys nationwide are holding accountable the wholesale distributors and the wholesale manufacturers. These companies have combined annual revenues of $400 billion. They were put in a specific place under federal law to be the gatekeepers. They were to raise a red flag if there were any suspicious orders or if too many prescription opioids were entering any market. Instead of being the gatekeeper, they were the gatekeeper, they just left the gate hanging wide open. They chose to ignore their obligations. They did not report suspicious orders. Instead, they profited billions and billions and billions, while the DEA every now and then would be able to find them in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but when you're making billions and billions and billions, who cares if you're fined hundreds of millions? Enter this litigation. We've discovered through various documents provided by the DEA that, in fact, these companies knew about it and they chose to just completely ignore it, and this lawsuit is now holding them account for their failure as gatekeepers. They've also, in addition to ignoring their role as gatekeepers, they've also marketed in the same way cigarettes were marketed in the 90s, that these are safe alternatives. This will make your pain go away, this will make everything better, and there's really no consequences. Most of my practice is as an injury attorney, where I represent people who have been injured in serious motor vehicle accident, workers' compensation, nursing home, negligence, abuse, and as I see my clients who have been injured, who have been prescribed these pain medications by their doctors, and they're coming back to me 6 months, a year later, and they cannot get off of them. They're not making sense. They're not getting the treatment they need because they are so hooked on and addicted to these opioid pills. And when you see the marketing and the commercialization of the pills, you can understand why. As we already talked about, the fines have been in the hundreds of millions, and yet these companies are still able to exist. They're still able to make billions of dollars every single year the top three, $400 billion revenue annually, even with these $200 million fines. Meanwhile, local communities like the city of Hagerstown have been left to deal with the results. And frankly, we don't, and a lot of other towns and counties and cities around the country have the means to really fight this. It's overwhelming, and that's kind of the point of this lawsuit. We need to get that money back for both past injustices and the future. How do we make things better? So we're filing suit because they failed to monitor, they failed to fulfill their obligations, and they marketed these drugs in a way that has led to the crisis that we now have today. City of Hagerstown has chosen to hire the Pool Law Group along with 6 other firms to represent them in this litigation and to hold them ultimately responsible. So everyone wants to know, well, how much are the lawyers being paid? How much is this going to cost in terms of taxpayer dollars? It's not going to cost anything. All the attorneys in this case are taking this on a contingent fee basis, meaning the attorneys will only be paid assuming there's a successful recovery for the municipalities. There will be expenses incurred, but they will be incurred by the law firm. The city will not have to front any of that expense. The attorneys will be reimbursed for their expenses, but they must be reasonable and they must be approved by the court. So up front, there's absolutely no cost to the city. You're not paying any attorney on an hourly rate. The recovery that you get is the only way that the attorneys are being paid in this case. Now you may say, wait a minute, don't we have a city attorney? I could say, Jason Morton, why don't you handle this entire claim yourself? Our firm, Jason, would not have the means to take on the pharmaceutical manufacturers and distributors. As I've talked about already, they have billions that they are going to use in their defense. You need teams of lawyers and you need millions and millions of dollars because that's what it's going to cost just in expert fees alone. Our group has already retained a number of top experts, former DEA agents who will serve to testify in this litigation, and the litigation expenses will be quite large. The benefit to hiring our team of lawyers is that right now the group that we're with represents well over 300 clients. So any case expenses will be split over those 300 clients, and that will allow the cost for the city to go down significantly, while it does not at all affect the potential return if a lawsuit and actual trial were to happen in Maryland. Question is, okay, so we get a lump sum of money. Well, what good does that do? As I talked about, we need to focus on the past, but I would say more importantly, we need to focus on the future. How is it that we can educate the children in this community to make sure they don't fall down the same paths that we've seen others go into? We need to provide better care. Things like the Wells House, Brooks House, things like that need to be funded. We need to give money back to law enforcement, fire, EMS, rescue, because they have had to respond to these issues far beyond anything that they should be expected to do. And then we need to arm them going forward. This problem is not going away tomorrow. It's not going away next year. It's probably not going away in 5 years. Some of the experts have said if we really focus on this, maybe in 20, 25 years, the opioid epidemic will be under control. Well, that's going to be a massive amount of cost, and that's what our team is focusing on. Not just what have we suffered, what can we expect that we are going to have to suffer as a community going forward. Now, Emily already addressed this, but a lot of people will say to me, well, look, yeah, opioid pills, they're a problem, but our real problem is heroin. And you're right, that's what we're seeing. But the statistics say heroin use all comes from an opioid problem. The people are not able to get their prescriptions, maybe their health insurance lapses, and they turn to a cheap alternative, which is heroin. They head down that path to black tar heroin, and a lot of times there's no turning back. Now, quick update on where the litigation currently is. The city of Hagerstown today is joining in this litigation, but the litigation has been ongoing for some time. Our group filed about the first 50% of these cases across the country. There are now several hundred cases that have all been consolidated for the time being in Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland has been one of the worst hit areas across the country. All the cases have been consolidated there simply for the purposes of convenience. There was an attempt to try and settle this case. That settlement is already out the window. The matter is presided over by Judge Polster, Harvard Law graduate, very brilliant man. He has a lot of experience in this. And his initial comment was, we need to resolve this case as soon as possible because every day we're here talking, 150 people are going to die from overdose. And we just have to resolve this. Well, there was an offer made, and the distributors, manufacturers said, forget about it, we're going to court. So now we're in the pre-trial discovery stage where the judge has said it's going to be open season for plaintiffs and for the defendants. Plaintiffs, you can go get every document you want from the DEA, FBI, whoever. Defendants, you can go get every document you want. That's going to go on for about a year. Most likely the first case to be tried will be the city of Cleveland. Our group represents the city of Cleveland. That case is likely to go to trial next summer, not this coming summer, but next summer. Once that case goes to trial, that verdict will determine the value of other cases and the potential of a settlement. Our group has 5 of the 21 leadership roles in this litigation. They had 2 of the 7 roles on the settlement conference, although, as I said, settlement was not successful. The city of Hagerstown choosing to sign up today means that a complaint will likely be filed in the next 30 to 45 days. The city of Hagerstown will then join the others in Cleveland, where pretrial discovery will take place for a year or more, and then ultimately the case would be transferred back here to Maryland for the case to be tried, and there would be a team of lawyers here to represent the city of Hagerstown. And so that is the current update. I have to say, very pleased that the city of Hagerstown has chosen to do this. We absolutely have an opioid problem. It's an opioid epidemic. We have it across the country, but we really have it here in the city of Hagerstown. And I'm hopeful for the future. I'm hopeful that this will provide funds for treatment, for education, and that the city of Hagerstown is ultimately going to be made a much better place because of this, and we're going to get the treatment and the healing that we need from this opioid epidemic.
I'd like to introduce the City of Hagerstown Fire Chief Steve Lohr.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Steve Lohr, the City of Hagerstown Fire Chief. My role here today, I view, is to try to describe to you the impact on one of 10 city departments here in the City of Hagerstown, and that's the fire department. It may surprise some of our listeners to know that in addition to our primary mission of preventing and suppressing fires, we are part of a larger all hazards mission where we respond to technical rescue, EMS calls, and all of the things that make Hagerstown a great place to work and live. There's, without question, the opioid crisis has had a direct impact on not only our department and our ability to deliver resources when we should maybe be doing other things, more traditional fire rescue things. Our units are tied up, I would describe at least twice a day in a city of 40,000 people and 12 square miles for people that are in many, many times life-threatening emergencies, not breathing, cardiac arrest, the kind of things that you don't come back from unless there is rapid intervention. Our rapid intervention is the administration of a drug that everyone in the public knows is Narcan. Administered nasally, it many times reverses the impact of overdoses. And I'll try to describe to you in my brief statement at the end 3 examples I'm personally familiar with that I would hope would grab the minds and hearts of our listeners. Nonetheless, the direct impact on Hagerstown Fire Department is, as I described, it's significant. The worst that I know of is 12 in one day. I say on average we're probably doing 2 a day. As first responders, our public safety colleagues, both Community Rescue Service here locally and the Hagerstown Police Department, have even greater responsibility in transporting people to the hospital, investigating these overdoses, and trying to get these things off the street. Previous speakers have identified this problem's not going to go away. I agree with that. It's draining resources at a rate faster than we can provide resources to deal with the problem. So let me end by saying 3 local examples. It's not uncommon for people to be transported from the street after an overdose to our local medical facility, and before they get out of the parking lot, when they're discharged from the emergency room, they're overdosing again. True story. It's happened more than once. Secondly, last spring, we had a series of overdoses that occurred on one of our streets here in town where 4 different times, 2 blocks apart, people were suffering overdoses. When you administer Narcan many, many times, the folks come out of that quick recovery violent. They're a threat to our first responders and to citizens around them, which makes the problem even worse. It's not isolated to them. I hear comments all the time about, well, they're doing that to themselves, just let them be. That's not the American way. I don't think any of us in this business would ever endorse that kind of approach to this problem. So therefore, I applaud our political leadership and our colleagues for trying to do something to reverse this for future generations. Lastly, I want to tell you the story about a city resident who had a 5-year-old child. And that 5-year-old child, you would think that a mom would normally be teaching them how to memorize the alphabet, do mathematics, life skills of everyday life. And instead, that 5-year-old learned how to administer Narcan to her mother if mommy didn't wake up. Now, if that is not an indication of how serious this problem is for society, not just in Hagerstown, Maryland, but in any town USA, I don't know what else to share with the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Lastly, I'd like to introduce the Chief of the Hagerstown Police Department, Chief Brito.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chief Victor Brito, the Chief of Police of the City of Hagerstown. It's actually pretty sad for me to stand here before you to talk about opioids and addiction, but I can tell you in my 29 years of law enforcement, I've never seen a crisis like this one. Over 80% of our property crime is addiction related, with a growing portion of that pushing towards violent crime. Last year in the city of Hagerstown, we had 187 overdoses, 15 fatalities. This year, from January 1 to date, we've had 60 overdoses and 8 fatalities. It's significant. The strain on our resources are great. We do everything we can to make our city safe and resilient, and we will continue to do so. The issue here, and Councilmember Keller mentioned something very specific and very important. While most people relate to heroin and fentanyl, the overdoses that we have in the city, in my experience and with my detectives, virtually every debrief we have with people that have been either arrested or that have overdosed, there is an opioid prescription nexus, almost 80% of those. That's significant. So we have to get to the root of the problem. It strains our resources greatly. We'll continue to tackle this every day. But when I have to allocate resources, just imagine the overdose and our response, we have to respond to every overdose. It doesn't just stop with the overdose itself. We have an investigation to continue on past that. Every overdose that we have in the city, our narcotics investigators from the Narcotics Task Force debrief every overdose victim so we can get to the root cause of what's happening in our city to try to stop the dealer, primarily, from bringing that poison into our city. That's incredibly labor intensive. it takes away from our core mission to make our safe and resilient. So we're going to continue to do that. But again, I've been in this business for a long time. I have never, ever seen an epidemic like this one, and it strains us every day. It breaks my heart to see people continue to overdose and those type of things. There's many components of us solving this process and solving the addiction crisis, whether it be education, law enforcement, long-term care. But we have a lot of things to do, and this is a huge first step. And my hat and my heart goes out to Councilmember Keller and our council and our city, because they recognize the extent of the problem. It's huge for us, and we need additional resources to fight it. But thank you very much.
Lastly, I'd like to invite Captain Brown, Captain Dennis Brown. He is from Community Rescue Service, and to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Captain Dennis Brown. I'm the Life Safety Captain at Community Rescue Service. We are the 911 service, ambulance service that handles all the calls within the city, working diligently with our fire department and our police department. And to echo what Chief Lohr said and Chief Brito said, all we're doing right now is we're a little boy with a finger in the dike. We're giving Narcan to these patients and bringing them around, and we're bringing them around to overdose another day. What we truly need is real-time solutions. We need treatment facilities. And I think what the city council and the mayor is doing is right on point. So I'd ask all the citizens in Hagerstown to stand behind this, and let's see if we can't fix this problem. And we can only do that through ongoing treatment so that people can beat this habit. Thank you.
I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And before we go, I would just like to recognize Sonny, who is here on behalf of Congressman John Delaney, Sheriff Mullendore, and Chief Kleck from the Hagerstown Fire Department. Thank you guys for being here today, and thanks for joining in.